Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Today I want to build a planter that is 4 foot by 8 foot by 2 foot deep. And I can confirm, as I have just returned from the lumber yard, that wood prices are freaking insane. 2x4s that used to cost less than $2 are now closer to $9. So I wanted to build this garden box with as little wood as possible. And so what I've done here is, let me show you what I've got in the truck. Okay, first off, as I'm sure you've seen before, one mini garden planter builds, I've just got some corrugated roofing. This stuff is cheap. This stuff is like $15 a sheet for a 2 foot by 8 foot section. So that's what the sides of the box are going to be made out of. And then I also got some of this drip rail, and I'll explain later how I'm going to use this. I got 3 sheets of that, 3 strips of that, and I'll be using that. But I also, I'm going to need a little bit of wood for this. I tried to figure out if there was a way I could do this without using any wood at all. And of course there is, but it wasn't really going to be a savings in any way. Saving this old cypress from the girls' play set from years ago has turned out to be a very wise decision, even though it's been a pain to store. Now, if you don't get up there, if you don't have a couple cypress 4x4s hanging around your house, don't sweat that, because I'm going to be using such a tiny amount of wood in this project that I guarantee you can find the wood you'll need. Even if you have to use pallet wood or wood behind somebody's shed, somebody will have the tiny amount of wood you need for this garden planter box thingamajigger. Okay, let's go. Oh, I was gonna try to do this mostly outside because it's actually a pretty nice day out, but the sand gnats are horrible. So I'm gonna try to do part of it inside and part outside. First thing I want to do is verify that these actually are 24 inches. And they are not. They are in fact 26 3/16 tall. So look at there, I got more for my money than I expected. The 4x4s are going to go in the corners of the bed to provide structural support. I need to mark out the 26 3/16 on here. And then you can cut these on the chop saw if you want. You can cut it with a circular saw. You could cut it with a hand saw. I don't really want to put a lot of dust. Did I just say? I don't want to put a lot of dust in the shop, so I'm just going to judo chop these, okay? Hi-ya! All right, first cut. Bring that down. I'll actually use this one to mark this. Now, one thing you do want to be careful of is if you're using reclaimed wood, that there's no screws in here, because if you hit your hand on a screw or a nail, rusty nail, you don't want to get tetanus. Also, if you do choose to use the saw, you'll ruin your blade, so make sure you're free of screws or nails. Bazinga! 2 down. Hadouken! Huzzah! All right. I was actually smacking those things so hard the pencil was popping in and out of existence. Check the video for yourself. I want to find out what the depth of this roofing is. And it is basically 9/16. So what I'm going to do is come in 9/16, and I'll figure out how far over I want to go. And I'll do that on both outside corners, because you could just screw this straight into this 4x4, but I don't want to do that, because you could come by and you could snag your clothes on here, or worse, snag your thumb on there and cut yourself. This way it'll close those edges in. And I'm going to cut those notches out by setting my saw up at 2 1/4 inches, and then the depth I'm going to make 5/8. So that'll be just a little bit deeper than the thickness of the corrugated metal. When I went to cut this, I noticed that that was a little aggressive, so I moved it back to, I think, 2 inches for the cut. Now I've got my saw set to 3 1/8 inches, which is what this space right here will be, what it worked out to whenever I measured to the inside of the blade. And now I just need to set the blade height to where it'll chop this section right here out. Couple of things when you're doing this. Anytime you're cutting something like this where you're cutting out, is the camera focused on me? I hate this camera. When you're cutting stuff like this, where there's a particular pattern that you're having to follow, don't get in a hurry and have a brain fart, or you'll end up cutting off, you'll spin it around the wrong way and cut the wrong piece off. Believe me, I've done that plenty of times. Another cool thing I want to point out is, man, I love this cypress. Even though this cypress has been outside for, I don't know, about 10 years probably. And when you cut it open, look how beautiful it is. This is my favorite wood to work with outside. And if you ever do want cypress, you're probably not gonna find this at your lumber yard. I had this custom milled whenever we built my daughter Riley's playset many years ago. And then I used it in the gate when Madison and I built the garden gate a few videos back. I had saved this whenever we took it down, and I used this lumber for that. A couple things too I want to tell you about lumber. Because lumber prices are so crazy right now, if you go on Facebook, people that do custom milling of green lumber, man, they're like, hey, this is my time to shine. I'll sell you a 2x4 for $7 instead of $9. And if you're gonna be working on a project outside, it's probably fine to use green lumber. But don't buy green lumber to save money on any project, especially that's gonna go inside, because it's just gonna roll up on itself as it dries. Unless you happen to get it kiln dried, which most of these places don't do. So I'm not knocking fresh milled lumber because it has its place. Just know what you're using it for. And while we're talking about the wood you might use, if you do go to buy wood, don't feel like you have to buy pressure treated lumber. Pressure treated lumber obviously is going to last a lot longer, but pine or fir will last a long time. I mean, you're talking about how long do you want to get out of this planter box? 10, 15 years? Don't buy pressure treated. I see a lot of people building planter boxes out of pressure treated lumber, and they'll cite that the FDA says that it's totally safe. Well, if you want to look back at the history of government saying things were safe that turned out to not be safe, by all means, if you come to the conclusion that it's totally safe to build your planter box out of pressure treated lumber, do so. And then, when you get hot, sit back and drink a nice cool glass of radium water. I'm going to split that sheet of corrugated metal in half for each end. And for that, I get to use my brand new handy dandy cordless jigsaw from Milwaukee. Well, that pencil doesn't show up very well on there. And that didn't work at all. Time for a Sharpie. Actually, it's not a Sharpie at all. It's a Milwaukee ink saw. Not sponsored by Milwaukee. Although if they did want to sponsor it, please feel free to give me a call. Mucho más bueno. Now you could use 10 snips for this, but like I said, I'm gonna use the jigsaw and I've got a hacksaw blade in it. This is my first actual use of this blade, well, of this saw. First complaint, it's kind of hard to see. Maybe not the best surface to cut it on. I'm gonna hit those edges with some sandpaper. You could use a file if you have a file. You're probably wondering why I didn't just tear that sheet of metal with my bare hands. And sure, I could have, but I don't like to be a show off. I like to keep it real for the folks at home, okay? I did want to show you, these are the planter boxes that I built last year for Kim. These are obviously raised off the ground, elevated if you will, and these were made with cedar, the outer boxes and everything, but the legs were just made with regular fir. It's the Riveter remix. These were made with fir 4x4s, and they're perfectly fine. I mean, yeah, it's only been a year, but they are as solid as can be. If you haven't seen that video, I will put that video link up here and check that out. Stole Kim's garden cart to get all this stuff out here. Be sure to be careful when you're moving this corrugated metal around. Probably better to wear gloves, but I like to live dangerously, so don't cut your hands open. We got our garden started. I don't know, we got these potatoes planted. Maybe they've been planted a month. And right after that, the tsunami hit, and we thought we'd probably lost them all, but they're all coming up beautifully. I mean, I don't know if all these come up, we'll probably end up with 300 pounds of potatoes here, but we'll see. So, but we had this section right here. We've kind of changed everything up how we were going to do this. So I'm going to put this garden planter right here. The potatoes stop right there and right here. And then she's going to use this, I think, for strawberries. So let's get it put together. We're doing the back to Eden method of gardening. So that's why we've got all these wood chips here. And these wood chips are anywhere from 4 to 8 inches deep. So I've got to move them out of the way. But I will say, so far, I've been really impressed with how well this has been working, because other than that storm, you know, for several days, you know, maybe close to a week of raining, and then we haven't watered this not one time. And these potatoes are just growing like crazy out here. So far, so good. I've got a ton of gravel in my shoes, girl on my shoulder, heart full of blues out in the dirt. And I'm gonna take a piece of the roofing and align that top up, and I'm gonna pre-drill. Anytime you have to pre-drill for screws, okay, I actually picked up they're for roofing. They have a little rubber grommet at the bottom of the screw, behind the head. Anytime you're pre-drilling for a screw, the bit you use should be the size, I mean, a lot of you may know this, but the size of the center of the screw, not the thread, the actual solid piece of the screw between the threads. That's how big you want your hole to be that you're pre-drilling. So I'm gonna go ahead and just get one started here to get rolling. And then just work my way down. Actually, I'm going to lay this down because that would be easier. Now, if you're using a wood like cypress, this is a very soft wood. So you could strip out the wood where the threads are on the screw very easily. This is where if you've got a second set of hands, would come in handy. I currently do not. So I'll just make it work. At this point, you could say, it's done. It's just a raised garden bed. Who cares if it's all cattywampus and out of whack? I'm just growing flowers in it. But that's not how I do it, okay? I'm gonna square this up and I'm gonna level it up. And let me show you, if you don't know how to make sure when you're laying something like this out, if it's square or not, the way you do that is, you measure from that corner to this corner, and that's 12 1/8. And then you measure from this corner to this corner, and that's 111 1/8. So I know that I've got to pull this in order to get this square. And you want to split the difference between those. I'm at 111 5/8. I'm at 111 5/8. It's almost like I knew what I was doing. Okay, next what I want to do is level it sideways and end to end. And that's level. Okay. So this end has got to go down. I was just gonna say, and when you're doing this, be careful, because this is when you'll cut yourself. And I just sliced across my thumb. So this is the part where you want to be careful, or you'll slice yourself. Oh, that burns. Next, just to help with this buckling at the top, I got to put one more screw all the way around at the top, and that'll help with some of that. But I'm also going to take this extra piece of wood that I had, scrap, and I've cut it to fit. And the way I did this was I measured from that end to that end, where I know that it's, if you measure from the middle, you won't get this right. So measure each end to end, and then cut your piece of wood to that length. Now this would be the part where you would normally run a wood top on here to keep you from slicing your thumb open on the top edge like I just did on the bottom edge. But remember at the beginning of the video, whenever I showed you that I had bought this drip rail? Yep, that's right. We're gonna put this drip rail on the top edge, and that is gonna give us some extra strength and a nice, you can't cut yourself on this, okay? I went ahead and did what I should have done 45 minutes ago and put some gloves on. Overall, I've got about 50 bucks in this project because I had the 4x4s that I could already use. So, you know, worst case scenario, maybe you're in this 75 bucks. How else are you going to build a 4 foot by 8 foot by 2 foot deep raised garden planter for 50 to 75 bucks? And it's nice and sturdy. This top edge, there's no way I can cut myself, totally protected. Shout out to Corey the Laser because he asked for it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.